I really think that the majority of people spend most of their time in a state of readiness in their life. They're always ready for whatever's going to take place. And it's like an idol. So the hormones that are associated with getting up and going and reacting stressfully, those hormones are hormones that create a primitive mechanisms where we go into survival, right? And living in stress and living in survival is not a time for us to open our hearts, right? So get bruised, get damaged, get injured in your life. The stronger the emotion you feel towards that event in your life, the more altered you feel from that experience. The brain freezes a frame and takes a snapshot, and that's called a long-term memory. So people think about the problems that happened in the past, and they produce the same chemistry in their brain and body as if the event was happening. So what happens is the body gets conditioned emotionally into the past. So now the trauma or the betrayal is not just in the brain now, it's in the body. So the body, in a sense, gets programmed or conditioned to stay in survival. And when you're in survival, it's not a time to be vulnerable. It's not a time to open our hearts. It's not a time to create. It's in a state of arousal where we have to keep our attention on things that matter, the things in our environment, the way our body is feeling and how we're managing ourselves, and time in and of itself. So to change is to be greater than your body, to be greater than your environment, and to be greater than time. And so when we're stressed, it's really hard to change. When we're stressed, it's really not a time to change, it's not a time to create, and it's not a time to learn. So then, this is a mechanism that's primitive in our biology. And to be able to tame the animal so that the animal self, so it's no longer in a state of readiness, trying to always predict the worst case scenario, just so you could be ready if it happens. It turns out that that's the conversion of those survival states into a state of creation. We've discovered some really important things about it. And if you teach people how to convert from that sympathetic nervous system to the parasympathetic nervous system, if you teach them how to trade resentment and impatience and frustration, justified or not, that's doing no good for you, for an elevated emotion, and practice making the chemistry that is associated with love. And in the beginning, it's difficult. And so if you place your attention on your heart, we discovered that there's a very low frequency that you can measure that actually goes up, that's indigenous to what the heart needs in terms of a life force to beat. So where you place your attention is where you place your energy, and all the things you can place your attention on, place it on your heart. Now, slow your breathing down, and if you can slow your breathing down, you can take your body out of that state of readiness. And when you slow your breathing down, you slow your brain waves down, and your body starts to move out of that state of sympathetic arousal. Practice feeling elevated emotions with your heart: kindness, care, love, appreciation, gratitude, and you'll get good at feeling that way if you keep doing it. So then, when a person's in that state, the heart in and of itself, when it's activated like that, gets super organized. It gets coherent, and it sends a signal to the brain, literally in the form of information, to tell the brain, the survival system, to shut down, that the amygdala, literally, the lights go out. It resets the baseline for the trauma in the brain, and the body moves out of survival. And now it wants to create, and the heart informs the brain to get creative, and the brain goes into these beautiful, organized alpha brainwave patterns. And in alpha, we tend to imagine, we tend to create, we tend to dream. So the heart informs the brain, it's time to create. That's, I think, when we're in that state of inspiration where we're actually falling in love with what we're creating. We're bonding to that creation, and the stronger the emotion we feel, the more we remember that future. And I think that's how people really begin to make those changes. Now, getting there is a daily practice. Getting there is something that you have to keep doing. So the block for us to feel love is that if we're living in survival, you have to make up your mind that state is not a state to create, and break away from the people in your life and your schedule and your phone and all the obligations you have long enough to reset. There's nothing wrong with doing any of those things. But when we're stressed, we're altered. That stress is when we're out of balance. We're not ourselves, right? We can't relax and be authentic. And so typically, it usually takes a crisis or a disease or a diagnosis or a trauma or a loss or a betrayal for a person to really decide, is this really who I want to continue to be? So my message is, why wait for that, right? So there's nothing wrong with saying, I want to be in a relationship. I want the following things in a relationship from this person, or what might be my ideal relationship. I think people have an image in their mind of what they like or what their type is or whatever. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I think what people are really looking for is connection and joy. Like, people should be in a relationship. The reason they should be in a relationship is to be overjoyed to be with the person that you're with, right? You want joy in your life. For me, it would make sense then if the person got very clear on what they wanted, then they should start on the journey to become that very person. They should really work on being that very person that they want. So there would have to be some change that they would have to make in order to be worthy enough to create a person that they would attract in their life. And we cannot attract anything in our life that we feel separate from. Trusting in a future that you can't see or experience, you have to lay down the very thing you use your whole life to get what you want, to trust that something greater could happen. And that's not something that's very easy. So I like the idea that it wouldn't happen on a date that was from an app. It could happen in a bank. It could happen at a seminar. It could happen in the grocery store, all in a way that you least expect, right? And I think that when we get to a point where we're so happy with ourselves, we're no longer looking because we feel like we already have it. I think that's the state where people attract an equal.